Hello and welcome to Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest today is William C. Rhoden, former New York Times sports columnist and co-host of a podcast. We'll hear more about that later. He's also writing for the Undefeated and wrote a great book, $40 Million Slaves. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. Please, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please like, please comment, please share. Sri, of course, is the Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors, a digital and virtual events consultancy. Without further ado, Sri Srinivasan.
Hello. Hi, folks, and hi, Neil. Great to have you with us, and thanks for getting us to another year. We can't believe it. 2021 is here. So much for us to talk about, so much news, and we are honored to have Bill Rhoden. I'm going to talk more about him in a few minutes, but he is the legendary New York Times sports columnist who retired a few years ago and has been doing an amazing range of work, including an awesome podcast. And please tell us where you're watching from. Please hit share and tag your friends. They can watch now or watch later. Neil, how's your New Year's started?
Things are going well, Sri. Thank you. It was a relatively quiet New Year's. We were home here in Springfield, Virginia. But I have to say it wasn't very different than the past several New Year's. With a 7-year-old at home, we focused on getting her to bed relatively early. She did want to stay up to midnight this year, but that's not happening for a couple of years. And Pam and I watched a little TV, and then about 11:45 we turned on ABC. That's our tradition. We watched the ball drop. I will say we were a little bit disappointed. I don't think they did as good a job dropping the ball this year in terms of they dropped the ball on dropping the ball. They didn't focus. They kept talking through the ball drop. They didn't really focus on it and put the big timer up. But we said our Happy New Year's and then went back to watching a little TV and fell asleep. What about you, Sri? How did you guys? You're in Puerto Rico. Anything,
we're in San Juan, and our kids are older. They're 17 and a half. Locked at home with your parents on New Year's Eve cannot be a good thing for any 17-year-old. But we were blessed that we are together, and we're an hour ahead here. So when it turned midnight, the Times Square ball hadn't dropped yet or anything. So we stayed awake for an extra hour to watch. But in between, we had fallen asleep. It was quite a boring New Year's, but we're safe, and that's really important. Here they take New Year's Eve and even Christmas very seriously, and it's much longer celebration here. They go through the Feast of the Three Kings, which is in a few days. So Christmas and New Year connect and go much longer, and fireworks everywhere, amateur fireworks, people shooting from the top of their rooftops and balconies and things like that. So when you're from Manhattan, you're not used to that, but it's awesome to see. And there's a real sense that we hope 2021 will be better, but we're not there yet. There's still a long way to go, and we'll talk about that in the news today.
Let's welcome some of our guests who are watching. Doug Levy is joining us from California.
5:30 in the morning.
To have you join.
5:30 in the morning. Former guest. Hi, Doug.
Right. Our friend Rahadian from Long Island. Miriam is watching on YouTube. Of course, again, we're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Our friend Patty Freudenberg joining us on Facebook. She usually has joined us on LinkedIn. So Patty, we're curious about the different experience. Let us know what you think watching on Facebook versus LinkedIn. And Linda Lawrence is joining us from Long Island. Our friend Jonathan Borstein, of course. And my mom watching from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York, wishing everyone a Happy New Year. Hi, Mom. Edward Ford, representing New Jersey. Diane Stefani, not that far away as well, in Margate. And again, another New Jerseyite, Stephen Kaplan from Ramsey,
New Jersey in the house, yeah.
Carla, one more. One of our producers, Carla Baranauckas. And Carla is the one that put us in touch with Bill Rhoden, our guest today. So we're really excited about that. Who else do we have? Pradnya Haldapur from here in Silver Spring, Maryland, close to where I am in Springfield, Virginia. Nick Hill is joining us now in Jupiter, Florida. Our friend Rose Horowitz from Connecticut. Hi, Rose. And Pradnya Haldapur is going to be switching from Facebook to LinkedIn so she can tag folks. So again, thank you, Pradnya, for doing that. And everyone else, we encourage you to share this on your stream. At least give it a like. Tag your friends who you think they might be interested in watching, not just the paper as a whole, but our great guest, Bill Rhoden. He's going to be talking about sports, but really the intersection of race, politics, and sports, and how everything works together. His podcast, he's going to be talking about this book he wrote, $40 Million Slaves. It'll be very, very interesting. Susan is joining us from Connecticut, and Chris Gorman and Ellen, both in New York. Ashok Sharma.
Chris is one of the people who helped make this show in a way because of my connection with Bill. We spent a lot of time together thanks to Chris. He was on my podcast when I had a podcast on CBS. Chris and I worked together at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where he and Bill did some work together to get young people to the museum. And so we had some great memories at the Met. And so we'll talk more about that as well. So thank you, Chris, for all you've done.
And we've already said hi to Pradnya, but I have to put this comment up on the screen, particularly for my mom. I'm having a good hair day, apparently. Pradnya, you're right. Sure, you too, I think. Your hair is, you're having a good hair day.
Piece of hair.
Pradnya, thank you very much for noticing. It does take effort. It does take waking up a little bit early. But tell me, do you prefer this or the Santa hat I wore 2 weeks ago? Let me know in the comments. Ashok is here from Dubai. Michelle is joining us from Bowie, Maryland. And that's just a great, folks. Thank you for being a part of the New York Times read-along family. And Ed Ford is excited to hear Bill's perspectives on a range of issues. So before we get to Bill, I want
to tell everyone that it's really important for you to tag and share this with your friends. Hit retweet on any of our channels. And I also want to make sure Bill himself has seen the tweet and the Facebook post so that he can share it on his platforms. We'd love to have his audience join us for this session as well. And we'll be talking about a wide range of topics. So please join us and please tag your friends. If they can't watch now, this will be live as soon as we're over. This will be rerunning on these channels as soon as we're off the air. So please do tag your friends, anyone who's interested in the news and interested in what's happening in America and the world. This is a great time to tag them and introduce them to the New York Times Read Along. We've done this for 5 years now, and Neil and I have been together for about 3 years doing this, and we read the Sunday New York Times out loud every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so please join us.
And as a reminder, our guest today is William C. Rhoden. You can find him on Twitter at WC Rhoden. He's a former New York Times award-winning sports columnist, writer at large for The Undefeated, and author of $40 Million Slaves. Really looking forward to hearing him discuss that book. He's also the co-host of a podcast, Bill Rhoden on Sports. So before we bring Bill on, we do want to take care of a couple things. First, we want to give a shout out to our team that produces the show every week. In addition to Shri and myself, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranauckas. You can follow them at Big Green Pen, at Steve DeReeve, at Julia L. Weeks, and at Kabara. One of the things that's unique about our productions is that we have people watching on Facebook and LinkedIn, our two kind of major platforms. Paula is on Facebook, Steve is on LinkedIn, sharing links to stories, providing context, answering questions. Too many people just put up a live stream and they don't have staff helping you. And that's what we have. So we have a great team behind us. Again, Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla. And of course, Carla is the one that helped us get in touch with Bill Rhoden for this week's show. Street, could you say a word about Muckrack
Sure.
and the work we do with them?
Yeah, we just want to thank Muckrack, our incredible sponsor. They've been very kind to us, helping us bring the show to all of you. Please check out Muckrack, and they offer a variety of services for journalists as well as non-journalist public relations professionals. So please check them out, and you can contact us. You see our contact information right on the screen. Sri at digimentors.group or Neil at digimentors.group. So please do contact us. And a big thank you to Mike Schneider, Greg Galland, Lee Semmel, Emma Haddad, and others at Muckrack. And I also want to tell everyone that we couldn't do this without that incredible team that you met on screen just a couple of minutes ago. And that's what makes what we do so important and so different. And that's also what our company does, DigiMentors. So if you like this production, this is what we bring to our virtual events, to conferences, to all kinds of events, big and small. We've done events for 50 people and events for 100,000 people. We've done hybrid events, virtual events. If you have an event you would like to talk to us about, please get in touch. Or if you like your own talk show, we have multiple talk shows that we work on for others that we produce from behind the scenes, and we'd love to do that for you or your company. So please contact us about that as well.
Great. So we have a number of people who have joined us, Naomi Service, and I've gotten a couple of votes on the Santa hat. We'll tally them up afterwards. Sujana Chandrasekhar, Dr. Chandrasekhar is joining us and reminding us to keep wearing our masks. Absolutely. We certainly need to keep that up. Vijay is joining us and is from Potomac, Maryland. And our friend Ron Thomas is here as well. He's in Verona, New Jersey. And I'm sure he'll be going back to Dubai fairly soon. And Bill Mitchell is joining us from Boston. Hello, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I also want to say that Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Korean, two surgeon friends of ours, have a terrific show that runs at 11 a.m. Eastern on all of these channels. So please do follow them. And today they are talking about COVID-19, epidemiology, trauma surgery with two doctors. So please check out She's on Call is the name of the show, and it's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please follow them, please connect with them, and I'm honored that our team is able to work with them on this show.
Absolutely. So Sri, why don't we take a look at what's in the paper for today, and before we bring in our guest, Bill Rhoden.
Sure. So what I think we should do is look at the rest of the paper, and then we'll come back to the front. We'll bring Bill in for the front page. So there's the front page. Let's go to the other sections.
So there's the front page, and one special section for today that we definitely are going to spend some time with. Tom Jolly gave us a heads up on this. Notes from the newsroom. Overnight emails tell the story of 2020. So if you look at the fine print, late note for January 1, Happy New Year. Late note for January 24, good morning all. House Democrats wrapped up their impeachment case against the president. You skip down, late note for May 29, good morning. Looting and arson in Minneapolis, related violent protests in Denver, Columbus, etc. So we'll take a look at that. The Sunday business section, Wall Street eyes billions in the Colorado. Investor interest in water rights could redefine century-old rules for who controls one of the most valuable economic resources in the United States. We have the at-home section, which, as you know, is a replacement, if you will, for the travel section. And this is really interesting. It's we're making plans for after, and a number of takes on what people are looking to do once things go somewhat back to normal, which we're hoping they'll happen sooner rather than later. The arts and leisure section, let's take a look over here. Interesting cover art. It's hard to make out what it is. A director's beautiful bummers. The filmmaker David Fincher says he likes movies that leave scars. So I'm trying to make out what that artwork is, but that's definitely interesting. We have, what else do we have? The Sunday Styles. This is a great piece by Katie Rossman, a former guest on the New York Times read-along about Jeannie Buss, who inherited a basketball team. You may have heard of it, the Los Angeles Lakers. And there were a number of great interviews that Katie did for this piece. So definitely want to take a look at that as well. Last few more sections are Sunday Review. The graphic is obviously around coronavirus. Looks like a crumbling healthcare system. Full isolation. The first coronavirus outbreak in the U.S. happened in a nursing home in February. Since then, 120,000 nursing home workers and residents have died, largely out of sight. The disaster continues. And Sheree, I'll mention that first case was in Snohomish County, Washington, where I used to work for United Way of Snohomish County. So we saw it break out first in Washington State, really hit New York, and then spread around to the rest of the country. The book review, Which Way Right? The first review, Conservatism, The Fight for a Tradition by Edmund Fawcett. And that review is by Andrew Sullivan. And we'll definitely be talking about the New York Times cover story with Bill. It's a deep dive on the college football season. There's a subhead, you may not be able to see, Dangerous Games. But the college football season brought joy to fans and revenue to universities, but it ends amid a resurgent pandemic and with a lingering question: was it worth it? And my 2 cents is that the same question can be applied to both the Major League Baseball season that I followed very closely, being a big baseball fan, go Yankees. But also basketball. They moved into a bubble in Disneyland. Was it worth it? That's the question. So there's our paper for this week. This is the front page with a lead on the Russian hacking, display story on transporting the infected in California. That's the back of an ambulance. A push by senators to nullify the vote. COVID's hardships raise struggling communities, a piece about the Georgia race, the Georgia runoffs, and more. Sri, you have that front page there. You want to? We'll pull that up and show people a little bit closer.
Sure. I'm going to just zoom in so that just people can see it properly. But thank you for that tour of the Times today, and let's see what the front page story is. And maybe this is a good moment to bring in Bill after we just scan these headlines. The Russian hacking story is the lead. I would have thought the lead would be about what's happening in Washington and the craziness with basically senators and congressmen being committing treason at the moment. But I'm sure there's a story here on that as well. Here's about the California faring the infected in California, COVID's hardships, senators push to nullify vote gets Pence nod. Look how small that is. I would have put that as a much bigger story. And here, stimulus puts deficit hawks in lonely spot. Afghans living in fear as more become targets. In Georgia race, raising uncomfortable truths. And this is about Raphael Warnock, the Reverend, who is one of the two, who's in one of the two Senate races in Georgia. So let's bring on our friend William C. Rhoden, give him a heads up that he's about to be on camera, and bring him on to say hello to us and thank him for his time here today. Hi, Bill.
Hey, Sri, how are you doing, man? That was quite a quite a build-up. Yeah, but thank you very much for being here. I will say that I never people say you retired. Well, no, I mean I didn't retire. I've never retired. I resigned from the Times after 34 years, and I've been working as a writer at large for ESPN's The Undefeated. It's a tremendous site. I've been working there since 2016. In fact, as soon as I left the Times, I began working as a writer at large for The Undefeated. And one of the most gratifying things I do with The Undefeated, ESPN and Disney set up an initiative, a fellowship. It's called the Rhoden Fellows. And the Rhoden Fellows is a year-long paid fellowship for 6 students from historically Black colleges and universities. You know, I went to Morgan State University. And probably before 2016, I was having breakfast with an executive at Disney at the time, and we started talking about legacy. And I said, what I want my legacy to be is putting more talented African Americans in the sports industry pipeline. We'll talk about that later, which is probably one of the most segregated institutions in our country. And so we set up the Rhoden Fellows, and we're now we're now on our 4th class of Rhoden Fellows, where we've just put out applications for the 5th class, and it's really just been remarkable. And I write a weekly column called Locker Room Talk, kind of based on your boy, POTUS 45.
Boy.
I know, but anyway, so yeah, and then of course, obviously, I do keep in touch with. I talked to Randy Archibald, the sports editor at the Times, an African American, great guy. And Kurt Streeter, who really followed me as a Sports Times columnist, extraordinary journalist, doing a really outstanding job. So all in all, it's all good. Want to wish everybody a happy New Year, and let's go.
Well, thank you. I want to say a couple of things about Bill. If the buildup hasn't been good enough already, that Bill is not just a great writer, which you know if you've read him in the Times or in The Undefeated. He also is a terrific broadcast personality. Many of us got to know him through one of my favorite sports reporters on ESPN. Went off the air, and now he has a podcast, which is excellent, and you must all check it out. It's called Bill Rhoden on Sports, Rhoden. His Twitter handle is at WC Rhoden, and he and attorney Jamal Murphy talk sports on and off the court, including the intersection of sports, racism, and politics. I also want to say that Bill doesn't know this, but I read his book, $40 Million Slaves, when it came out, and it had a huge impact on people understanding the NBA and what it's all about. And even the title was very provocative. So can you talk a little bit about that, Bill?
Yeah, again, thanks a lot, Sri, and it's been a pleasure knowing you all these years. You were always on the cutting edge of this technology, and I think we are start doing the podcast around the same time at CBS. But yeah, basically $40 million slaves. And by the way, that I followed that up with a book like the next year, a book called Third and a Mile, which is an oral history of Black quarterbacks. But really, what $40 Million Slaves was about, and kind of what I continued about, and what I talked to the Rhoden Fellows about, is power and control. Power and control. If you don't have power and control, basically, what are you doing? A lot of the fellows will, part of their fellowship is spending a week in Bristol, Connecticut. And of course, like a lot of young journalists, everybody wants to be a Stephen A. Smith or they want to be in front of the mic, and we'll take them to the control room. And I said, no, that's where you want to be, power and control. And basically $40 Million Slaves was about that. It was about the Black presence in sports has obviously increased in the NFL and in the NBA. But when you look at the power and control, even today in 2021, when you look at where is the power and control, African Americans are still out of it. And so the book was really about it's a combination of history. We start from the plantation, with plantation athletes, Black athletes, and how today there's a different kind of plantation, particularly when you look at big time college football. I mean, who else but big time college football, which is dominated by young African American athletes, many of whom come in with a lot of undiagnosed medical conditions, including a lot of cardiomyopathies, and have them playing football in the middle of a pandemic, and so the book was really about where we've been, where we are, where we're going, but in the context of how do you get power and control in an industry which you dominate on the field, but are almost a non-factor in terms of power and control off the field. So that, in a big nutshell, was what Dollar Slaves was and is about. For better or for worse, it's still somewhat part of the issues are still there. I mean, some names have changed, but the idea of really not being in seats of power is still the same, and not in athletics, but also in our business and in journalism and on Wall Street and corporate America and real estate firms and publishing. The Times did a piece, I guess, maybe last month or something about the blackout even in publishing. So, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I just want to ask about the title. Did you get any?
Well, people always, people, ask, well, how could they be slaves? But really, in the first paragraph of the book, I explained where the title came from. The title really came from an incident that happened. There was for those who remember that New York once had a basketball franchise, the Knicks. There was a player named Larry Johnson who played for the Knicks, and a while back, Johnson just refused to talk to the media. He boycotted the media, and this went on and on and on. Finally, the NBA kept fining Johnson and fining him, and so one day he just gave he called all the reporters and said, "Okay, I'm gonna talk. This is it." And he just went on to talk about how, we're a bunch of rebellious slaves of the Black players on the Knicks team. So we're a bunch of rebellious slaves here. And he went on and on and on, talked about and remember, he had just signed a $40 million contract with the Knicks, but he talked about how he felt like we're just rebellious slaves. But anyway, a few months later, the Knicks were playing a basketball game down in, I think, San Antonio somewhere. And one of the fans was heckling the Knicks and heckling Johnson in particular. And as Johnson came off the court, this white guy stood up and said, "Johnson, you're nothing but a $40 million slave." And his coach at the time told me about that. And I thought, wow, that's of all the ways to heckle people, usually they're called a bum or they're called a jerk or, all the other creative things that fans call athletes. But the fact that he said, he heckled him, I call him, "You're a $40 million slave," I thought put the essence of this story and my work in perfect context. And that was how so it actually, I didn't come up and say, "Oh, let's call the book 40 million." No, it was actually something that happened. And actually, Chris Jackson, who's a phenomenal editor, one of the few power brokers in publishing, who was working with me on the book, said, I think that let's go with that. So that's how that came about.
Thank you. Before we move on to the news, just your thoughts on the year's worth of sports news and how the sports world has handled two big things: the virus, as well as the racial awakening that at least appears on the surface to have happened in America. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I think let's start with the positive stuff first, man. I mean, because it's just, even today, I woke up reading about the treasonous behavior, senators and representatives in Congress. Just, but what has been heartening, and it does somewhat connect with $40 million slaves, is that probably over the past few years there has been this awakening of young African American athletes, especially the women who are playing in the WNBA. I mean, what they have done has been phenomenal. I mean, they really have spearheaded. I mean, we all talk about Colin Kaepernick and triggering the new civil rights movement and protest movement in sports, but the women in the WNBA have just done a phenomenal job of bringing attention to inequities in the United States, and using their visibility to really take no prisoners. I mean, they've really set the tone for the men, in terms of what they have done as a unit, and it's really been heartening just to see young African Americans who are happen to play sports not so much go above and beyond, but all we've ever asked was just be part of the struggle. I mean, we're not asking you to do anything beyond. And I think too often Black athletes, particularly when you looked at college, we're treated as different. They were treated as, well, we're kind of screw over, the students at, Black students at the University of Michigan, and a lot of big, predominantly white colleges where Black students are like, 2% or 3 or 4, kind of marginalized. What people care about, particularly at the Power 5 schools, are the Black athletes who play football, basketball, revenue, and they're often treated differently. And they acted differently a lot of times. A lot of times they weren't on the Black team. They were kind of, doing the whole, the white man's ice is better, and we have this status. And what's been heartening to see, and I think it's probably started with Trayvon Martin before. I said, guys, to a lot of these guys, you play at Alabama and you play at Auburn, a lot of those people couldn't give a damn about you. You're not really even real to them. You're like an inanimate object. Mississippi State, you kidding me? Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. You think that a lot of your white fans really care about you as a human being? And I think that as they began to experience racism and see some, outside the stadium or the court not have their jerseys on, you see young Black men and women, their peers, being murdered and executed by the police. I think a lot of them had come to Jesus moments, and they realized, wow, outside of the court without this uniform on and my helmet, I'm just another, N-word to a lot of people, conservatives, liberals, whatever. They just, and so I think that what you see is a movement. Hopefully it's a growing movement that among African Americans is that, it's not about Democrat or independent or Republican or liberal or conservative. It's really about us taking care of ourselves. I mean, has been our salvation for the last, 400 plus years is us taking care of ourselves. And that includes this group of people called Black athletes who become very visible. So that's, Sheree, that is one thing that I've seen heartening in a guy like LeBron and other athletes, even in the run up to the election. I don't have numbers to prove it, but I really think the fact that Black athletes push their multi-billionaire owners, to step up, and to many of whom are Republicans, and many of whom support, POTUS 45, but a lot of their their labor pool, young African American men, said, "Listen, man, you guys got to dribble and shoot. You have got to support us. You've got to support us. You've got to turn your stadiums into polling places. You have got to, in your encounters with these people in Hamptons, you got to say, listen, man, you guys have got to stop this, in this inflammatory, racist debate, because my whole labor pool are young Black folks." So anyway, I just really that has been one thing that's been for me that's been hard.
I just want to show this again where it says the WNBA, and I'm sorry we're getting a little echoey sound here, but here's the WNBA team that's owned by Kelly Loeffler, or co-owned by Kelly Loeffler, the Senate candidate, or the current senator who's competing with Reverend Warnock, who we'll be talking about in just a second. They wore this. I mean, you cannot imagine the distance American sports has come. I mean, you can, Bill, but for people watching in other countries, for example, they may not understand how different this is. They're not just saying vote; they're saying vote Warnock. They're not just saying BLM. They're saying, vote against my boss's opponent. In any other context, it's unimaginable. I mean, any other industry, anywhere else where you would say publicly, defeat my boss. I just cannot imagine that. And so great salute. Again, Black women stepping up as they have in so many aspects of politics and society. Here they're stepping up. And I think this photograph and this story is something everybody needs to know and understand.
Yeah. Maya Moore, who stopped, who quit the season so she could help get someone who was wrongfully convicted out of prison. I mean, she ended up marrying him, but to me, that doesn't necessarily diminish her commitment to the cause. And this thing about Warnock, like you said, it was really incredible. I mean, could you imagine, like, even at the New York Times or saying, wearing t-shirts in the newsroom, saying, well, but the fact and the fact that the person, Kelly Loeffler, the fact that she was their boss, and she denigrated Black Lives Matter. She denigrated everything that these women, Black and white, stood for. And they said, well, we don't know what we could do, but we could definitely say, vote her out of office. Don't vote for her. And so to come with vote Warnock, and a lot of people never heard of Warnock before this. So it's just an example, number one, of the power that, you could say entertainers give, but a lot of the power that, that athletes will. But again, this gets back into control, power and control. Roger Goodell, everybody. I mean, after the Floyd murder execution at the hands of the police, every corporation, every major corporation, NFL, NBA, my boss. I mean, everyone. Everybody was Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Roger Goodell. Black Lives Matter. And in the field and the NBA, Black Lives Matter. Y'all can paint slogans on your shoes and paint whatever. But I think a lot of athletes say, well, yeah, damn that. How much business does the NFL and NBA do with Black vendors? When you go up and down all seats of power in the NFL and NBA, in the legal department, in the marketing department, in the advertising department, where is the Black presence there, team by team by team by team? And I tell a lot of young athletes, after practice one day, instead of just kind of going out to the trains to the parking lot, take a spin through your organization. Walk through the building. Go up and down the building. You'll be stunned. You'll be stunned at how the absence of African Americans in your organization, that you're not even there. So again, I think that, as we move forward in this evolution, we're now in 2021. As African Americans in this country, we're in this existential race. This is never going to be over. This is never going to be over. It's never going to be over. This is one of those brawls that starts in the tavern and spills out into the street, but this will never be over. It's an existential relay race, and I don't really know what to say about this, but this will really never, this will never be over. I'll say that to. Well, anyway, let's.
No, well, thank you, Bill. One thing that I want to ask is, there's this. We understand that Michael Jordan's supposed to have said that Republicans buy sneakers too.
Oh, he said.
Did he actually say that?
No, he said it.
He did say it. Okay. And so, what do you think is that difference? Mark Lee, our friend, talked about Muhammad Ali and the 1968 track athletes who did the Black Power salute, and then the generation in between, maybe a couple of generations in between, including Jordan, to today's athletes. Can you just?
Yeah. Well, the fascinating thing about I'll talk about Michael by talking about LeBron James. And I think the wonderful thing about LeBron is that he's actually given athletes back their voice. He's given them their voice. He said, hey, man, it's okay to live deliciously. It's okay to have 2 or 3 homes. It's okay to make a lot of money, but you can still protest. You can still, and I think in Michael's generation, it was, and again, it's sort of the metaphor for, I kind of saw it even at places like the Times, and I hear from kids who go to white colleges where you're always in this minority. You're in the minority, and you're taught to kind of just kind of try to blend in and just not try to, rock the boat and just be kind of invisible. And Jordan was sort of kind of like that, like I'll just be quiet. But I think, and typically money is supposed to be empowering. Wealth is supposed to breed power. But with a lot of Black athletes, wealth was weakening because you didn't want to lose it. You didn't want to lose this wealth, so you do anything to keep it. You wouldn't say anything. You wouldn't. You keep your mouth shut. But I think that with Jordan, with LeBron and the message he sent to these young guys, number one is that, hey, man, money is power. Your money is liberating. You can tell. You can say that, and also there's power in numbers. One of the phenomenal things that we saw the past 2 years was this: the numbers of people. Numbers were people of people. The Milwaukee Bucks in the bubble said, we're not going to play. And I think a lot of NBA owners say, oh shit, really? What happens if they all get religion? And realize that if they don't play, there's no show. So, and Jordan, I think, now he's given money and he's kind of come on board, and kind of thing. It's fine, and it's great. Any evolution is better, but I guess with Jordan, man, where were you when you were really needed? At the height of your power, when you could have said march and they'll march, when you could have said Harvey Gantt. You could have, but that was then, and this is now, and let's look forward, and let's continue to build, to build on where we are now. There's just a hopefully a powerful dynamic build. You had Pat Mahomes, who's a quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, who pushed the ownership of the Chiefs to turn Arrowhead Stadium into a polling site. And there were other athletes who did sort of the same thing. So anyway, I just think the arc from Jordan and a guy like Jordan, again, I talk about evolution. Evolution from Jack Johnson to Joe Louis to Wilma Rudolph to Simone Biles to there's a continuum where talented young African American athletes say, well, we're black first. We're black first. I'm a black journalist first. I'm a black athlete. I'm black first. My people come first. And so I think we're coming out of that thing of wilderness where I mean, for the most part, you still have some people who support POTUS 45 and that kind of nonsense. But for the most part, I think that there's an awakening of whether you're a reporter at the New York Times or you're black first. You're black first, and we've gotten here for 40 years because we basically love each other and we've supported each other. Our salvation is each other. It's not, again, it's not whether you're conservative or a liberal brother. It's not about that. It's us. So I'm not sure the question you asked. I know start with George.
It's been amazing to hear you on these topics. I want to show you Rahajan's tweet. He said, "The worst advice I have received many times was go along to get along. F that," he says.
Yeah. And again, it's I mean I kind of understand it. Again, I mean I understand it. I mean we're in the belly of the beast here. This is the United States has one of the greatest killing machines in the history of civilization. This is a new ancient Rome. And so this is a very powerful. So to give that up, or to tell athletes, you have to really think twice about that. But there's strength in numbers. There's strength in numbers, and there's always been strength in numbers. And there's also strength. Part of you asked about the motivation of writing 40 Million Slaves and working on a book I'm working on now. But it's basically how important it is for any group of people, whether it's women or to really know history, to know their history. And in fact, I was telling I was speaking to some athletes, and they were like, Mr. Rhoden, you talk about all the history stuff, man, but that, that's past. I said, you know what? Your coaches, whether you play football, but your coaches make you spend maybe about 87% of your time watching game film. Everything you're watching is of the past, whether it's last week's practice, last week's game, last week's, it's last week. So why do you think your coaches are having you study the past if the past isn't important? And they because why? Because we learn from our mistakes. That's exactly the only reason for history is just to learn about last week's practice. Last week, why do we keep getting beat on this particular play? Why do we keep and you have to study that. I'm not talking about reading history or watching the past just for the hell of it, but it's to learn, to prepare. Everything is preparation for today's game. So, and that's why history is important. That when I was doing research for the book, I was talking in February, Black History Month, of course. And at the end of my talk, a young black girl raised her hand. She said, "Mr. Rhoden, that's all nice, but who was the first white player to integrate the NBA?" He said, "Who was the first white player to integrate the NBA?" And I said, "Oh, wow." But that's when it occurred to me that for a lot of kids, a lot of black kids who've grown up with the NBA being 97% black players, 80% black players in the NFL, they thought it's always been like this. They said, no, it hasn't always been like this. The kids who had enjoyed 8 years of Barack Obama. Wow, it's kind of always been like that. No, it's not always been like that. As they found out, So, So again, I forget the question, but our history is just really, 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 really important because, particularly for women, you have to understand. Yes, you're celebrating the anniversary of suffrage, but too many women and too many black don't understand. Man, there was a lot of blood. There was a lot of blood and sacrifice that went into this. And if you don't know about a struggle, then you don't think there's anything to fight for. And I think, and that's probably been the greatest thing about this year, Sri. It's probably been the greatest thing about this year from a lot of young people. man, they know that democracy is not a spectator sport. They know it's fragile, and you're gonna have to fight. You're gonna have to fight and hit the streets and get arrested and get maced. And because on the surface, the brothers, I forget who said, go along to get along. Yeah, on the surface, you go along to get along, and that could lull you into a sense of complacency. Like my silence means everything's cool. But as we found out this year, as soon as you raise your voice and you really begin to challenge authority, question authority, and actually push against, march against, doesn't matter if you're white and comfortable or who you are, the power, they say, oh, I'm speaking truth to power. But when power speaks back, that's when the shit is on, So to that extent, man, I think that's why this has been not just for athletes, for everybody, man, for all of us. Last year, I know everybody's talking about what a terrible year it was. Man, it's one of those eye-opening years. It's one of those eye-opening years about our country, our democracy, how you got to fight for it. You have to fight for it. This is, again, like I said, it's not a spectator sport. You got to fight for this, and you got to fight even as we speak. You look at the shenanigans that are taking place in DC, man. You almost can't go to sleep on this. If you love, well, anyway.
Bill, are you surprised that that story about treason perhaps that thing is underplayed on the front page of the New York Times?
Yeah, I think I heard you. Yeah, I was a little surprised. I mean, obviously.
I think we're having some trouble with Bill's audio. We will bring him back as soon as we can. We'll bring him back on the air. Thank you all for watching. You're watching my conversation with Bill Rhoden, the great Bill Rhoden, sports columnist, writer at the New York Times, columnist for many years, 35 years. And then he is now at the Undefeated. And I think we have him back. Let's see if we do. Hi, Bill, you're back. We had lost you for a second.
Yeah. Power speaking back.
That's right. We're discussing the news and so much more with Bill. Please tag and share this with your friends. Anybody who would enjoy this conversation, they can watch later. Edward says, Bill, you don't need the question, just keep speaking the truth. So we'll just turn the mic on you and you can just speaking. And he says, lots of other great comments coming in here as well. Rose Horowitz says, great storyteller. I have to listen to Bill's podcast. So let's talk about the podcast for a minute and about you and your partner, Jamal, who are doing the podcast.
Yeah, we just call Bros Pod. And really, Sheree, we started doing it, I think, around about the same time. You may have been a little, because you've always been ahead of the curve on these things, but it's really just fun. I mean, it's just fun, it's half hour and it's kind of like this conversation is what Bros Pod is about, and Jamal is a great co-host. His father was Clyde Murphy, a great civil rights attorney, and I know his father passed away and a few years ago, and his mother was saying, my son really wants to get into this business, and how would you say? So when we started doing the podcast, to me, mentoring is there's mentoring, and then there's being a mentor and being a sponsor. Sponsorship to me is much more important, And so I said, "Come on, Jamal, I'm doing this. Come on, that's the quickest way to get in this business. We're gonna start doing this podcast and start getting you credentials to go to places and all that. So Bros Pod, man, really in this universe of podcast. What'd you say today? I think it was Neil. You're saying, no, your business tree, right? That you hook up people with talk shows. I said, wow, it's just what we need. more talk shows. More talk shows. Yeah, but it's all good. So no, Bros Pod is just it's something I do every week. Me and Jamal do every week. We have guests on. I've had a friend of mine, Steve Wilson, who's a great musician, a great alto saxophone player, flautist. He's on the show a lot. because I love the music. But it's just fun, man. It's just, it's like with your show, it's just really fun. And I know you're supposed to think of numbers, but I'm like, well, listen, man, let's just have fun. So that's what Bros Pod. I also do one for the Rhoden Fellows for on the Undefeated. The Rhoden Fellows do a weekly podcast. It's called the Rhoden Fellows. HBCU 468 is the Rhoden Fellows podcast. And each week the students do their own podcast. It's really been fascinating, man, just to be around these 19, 20-year-olds. Right? Well, you got a 17-year-old. And it's just really fascinating to like,
It's amazing that you have two podcasts that you're. And I'm sorry about the audio. Neil, can you take over here and just see if that if it's my audio?
Absolutely, Sri. I'm going to take you off for just a moment. Bill, so we've covered the podcast, and just want to check if hopefully the audio is a little bit better. And I was going to bring in that podcast just to show folks. So give me a quick moment. This is the Rhoden Fellows. You spoke about that earlier. Tell us a little bit about the difference between, if you have two podcasts going, what are the differences and similarities between the two?
Well, it's like day and night. The Rhoden Fellows podcast, the students do this. The fellows do this. They produce it. They put it together. I may sit on the production meetings, but basically they decide, beginning Monday, we have weekly calls, but they decide what they want to talk about. So it's really, it's these 19, 20, 21-year-olds producing their own podcast. And what's interesting, Neil, is that these are kids who are at HBCUs. And it's really, the earlier you get, a lot of Black folks went to HBCUs, be my age and older because the doors were closed. But what I find fascinating with these group of HBCU kids is that they chose to go to HBCUs. They chose to go to Howard and Morgan and Hampton and Prairie View, because many of them were like the only Black kids in their high school class, or like one or two. And a lot of them just got tired of it. They said, you know what? I'm done. I'm tired. I want at least for 4 years of college. I like to find out what it's like to be in the majority, to hear what I call them, to hear the lion roar. So anyway,
sorry to interrupt, Bill. I want to explain to people what HBCUs are, historically Black colleges and universities in the U.S.
Yeah, there's PWIs, which is predominantly white institutions, and there's HBCUs, which is historically Black colleges and universities. Yes.
PWI, I hadn't heard that one before. This is
the
page. This is the page for the Rhoden Fellows. And just wanted to show this to folks. Ashton Edmonds and Jayla Jones, Parker Owens. This is our future, huh?
And actually, Ashton Edmonds just found out that he's going to be part of the, I think the New York Times, I think his Fellows program. He just, he just texted me a couple of days ago. We really, man, all the kids we've had. You got kids now going for the first class who are working at the Miami Herald, who are working at Deadspin, working at the Detroit Free Press. What the fellowship really is really unique, man. It's really almost like a post, it's almost like a graduate experience as an undergrad, because they produce content for the Undefeated and for ESPN and for Disney. They write, they produce shows. They before the pandemic, we have partners. The NFL is a partner, the NCAA is a partner, and so they would go to the Super Bowl, and they would go to the Big 12 basketball tournament. The Big East was a partner, and what they do, they would not go there as journalists. They would go there because it's really important to me that you see what I call the invisible industry, the stadium management, PR. There are like hundreds of thousands of jobs. I used to always see, when I go to the stadium covering a game, and the only time you really see any significant Black presence is when the players run out of the tunnel. But other than that, man, all the other stuff, the people doing all the stuff in the event management, up to the press box, all that, it's like, it's like almost totally non-Black. We're not even in that space. So I said, well, The Big 12 was one of the first people. Was one of the first conferences. You know what? We have to do something about that. And so we had partnerships where they said we're going to bring these kids to our tournaments and all that, and because they want Black kids to be in PR, to be in event management, to be in all these digital spaces that a lot of folks and a lot of Black folks don't even know exist. So anyway,
that's great.
Yes. Anyway,
can we? So this idea, the fellowship, and your nurturing and building up this generation of Black journalists. I want to go back to a point that Claire Smith shared with us. So she was a guest on the Read Along last summer. It was my incredible honor to interview her, and she talked about her experience, not just as a Black journalist, of course, as a woman as well, in baseball locker rooms, and how certain ball players, really took her, gave her some support when she was interviewing other athletes. If people were giving her a hard time, they stood up for her. And the big problem that she saw was the decline. I mean, we talked about basketball and football earlier, high percentages of Black athletes. Some students were not realizing that, wondering when the first white athlete came in. Right. But with the decline in Black ball players, baseball players specifically, and what that means for Black journalists and what that means for the dynamic. Can you speak to that a little bit, and maybe your experience covering sports earlier in your career, what that was like?
Yeah, actually, Claire is legendary, as you know. And when I came to the Times in 1982, I spent a year in the Week in Review, and I was at the Baltimore Sun, and I was a jazz critic at the Baltimore Sun. And when I came to the Times, started doing baseball, Claire was sort of that mother hen. She really protected me and showed me the ropes. Because baseball writers, it's like a clique of which you never. It's unbelievable. I mean, these guys, and I love them, I respect them, but they feel they're protecting the Holy Grail. And if you're not in that kind of clique, you're always perennial an outsider. And Claire has so much respect that she brought me in and showed me the ropes and that kind of stuff. But I guess you had two questions. One was the lack of Blacks in baseball. It's so funny. I just finished a project for Times Books, for Times Books on Demand, and it's called Black Baseball. In fact, I had a copy somewhere. I think a copy of it.
No, we can show that.
Yeah, but it's
on
called
the screen at least.
Yeah, and it's called.
That's the article. Sorry about that.
It's called Black Baseball, and it's really. And I wrote the introduction for it, but it's really the Times coverage of Blacks in baseball, and how it was kind of invisible, and then it picked up. But the fact is that a Black, baseball was really part of our ecostructure. Negro League baseball was $1 million business, and it's like so many other things that were, integration was sort of this this tornado or hurricane-like force that splintered the Black community into millions of pieces. We had this Black infrastructure, whether it's banks, whether it's an economy, whether it's Black baseball, a major part of that. And with quote unquote integration, with desegregation, what was a really vital part of our community basically was splintered and shattered and eventually gobbled up and died. So I think that one of my favorite characters, I think it was Rube Foster, the great Rube Foster. And Rube Foster started the Negro Leagues back in 1920, but his vision was that he wanted to have a Black team go into Major League Baseball. And that was his whole thing. Not just, we'll take Jackie, we'll take this guy, and that became the imprimatur of integration. We would take like this one, that one, and basically put Black institutions out of business. You know, John Hope Franklin said that if white institutions really wanted Black students, you know, they would do for them what they've done with Black athletes, which is take all the cream of the crop, you know, and use it for the pro. But I think that's what happened to baseball, is that once desegregation came and those institutions died, it no longer was an echo structure of our community. To an extent, the same thing happened to the music, to jazz, in an extent. I mean, that, you know, once you start putting the music in schools, you now have to go to the conservatory. And maybe Wynton and I will debate this, but once it became institutionalized and it was no longer this sort of university of the streets, you know, it became less and less of a presence in our community. So I guess if the question is what happened to Blacks in baseball, well, desegregation happened. Jackie Robinson happened.
Sure.
You know, and then the NBA happened, and the NFL happened.
And of course, you know, with Major League Baseball's announcement of formally recognizing the Negro Leagues as an official league, and that's long overdue. It will have a huge impact on our understanding of the history of baseball. Much, you know, I think that the impact on stats is one thing. You know, that's for you know, people who are into the stats, into baseball. It'll change their world, certainly, but hopefully there'll be a longer term impact, you know, in terms of what it does to the Baseball Hall of Fame, what it does, you know, even things like the Yogi Berra Museum. I know they have a great exhibit on the Negro League, and our friend Bob Kendrick, who was we interviewed him on Shree's Daily Show on the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues. Certainly, this will shine a light on that great history. I want to take a moment, 9:40, and we should take a look at the newspaper, because there's a big Sunday paper in front of us that I think has some interesting content, Bill. So we're going to walk through the paper real quick, and let's see what we have there. We talked about that front page. I want to call attention to the Insider column. This is my favorite part of the newspaper. It's Inside the Times. And you notice it's that New York Times motto, all the news that's fit to print, but it's upside down. This is a piece by David Vesey, a copy editor, about the fact, you know, about corrections in the New York Times and how important that is. You know, the corrections listings here, he writes, are one of the first things I read every day, and that is a common practice among many copy editors. Not necessarily an act of schadenfreude, as much as it's a daily reminder of the importance of diligence. Double check your math, look up even the most famous quotations. He talks about misspelling both Michael Jordan and Wayne Gretzky in the same headline, and calling Dallas the capital of Texas. I want to give a shout out to Carla Baranauckas, who is not just a national copy editor, but also was on the continuous news desk for the New York Times for a number of years. Bill, what's been your experience with corrections and copy editing at the Times or elsewhere?
Awful. as Carla can tell you, I mean, the worst thing, and I've had my shares of corrections, is it ruins your day. It just absolutely ruins your day to have a correction. You know, it's just terrible. You could have written the greatest column that you think, and then you'll get this note. You know, I got, you know, correction. You know, I'd get it from you know, sometimes Tom Jolly or whoever, correction, and it was just just the worst. It's just the worst. It's just the worst. But it does. You know, it's a discipline. In fact, it's a discipline that I preach to the fellows about. You know, checking and double checking and triple checking, and it's also given. I mean, Carla and other people. I mean, I have such a deep respect for editors. I mean, I always have, always will. I mean, even now at the Undefeated, Kevin Merida, who's the executive editor of the Undefeated, and he's a senior vice president, but great editor, just a great editor, wonderful editor. And I've just been lucky with us, Tom Jolly, Neil Amder, Joe Vecchione. I've just been really blessed. And now, Randy Archibald, although, but I guess the editing process is something that making a mistake sort of puts the fear of God in you. And even when I was with the Baltimore Sun, there were people there who just reveled in picking out errors, in the time.
Sure.
But it just shows you the esteem and the sense of responsibility that you carry when you've got a byline there, and when every sentence, and I always respected that. I respected the layers of editing. Now, having said that, I write a column now for the last 4 years at Undefeated, and one of the people, the person I work with is a guy named John X. Miller, who I've known for like 25, 30 years. There is also something to being free. I didn't realize how heavily edited I was until I just started writing locker room talk column and just, and just sort of being free, so there is a sort of balance between being super edited and then being free, and then kind of took a couple of years to learn how to be free, but always realizing, that you are your own safety net. That now, that part of the responsibility of being free is that you've got to make sure that you're also free and you're right. So anyway, that's
one interesting thing to note where you talk about the front page, prominent stories. Corrections are on the bottom of page 15 in today's paper. My understanding is that corrections don't have a home necessarily. They kind of fit them in wherever they do in the day's paper. But today's corrections, there was a particular protein that was referenced. It's a C1 inhibitor, not C1. So that's important to note. And then an article this weekend about the runoff election refers incorrectly to a lawsuit. A judge denied an injunction. The suit was not dismissed. So there is a real commitment to getting the story right. And certainly there have been some whoppers of correction. I think that there was an interesting comment, if I can find it in the article. Doctors bury their mistakes, lawyers lock theirs away, but reporters print theirs for the whole damn world to see. That was a quote one of the veteran reporters told David Vesey. As far as the rest of the paper is concerned, we'll just take a quick look and scan through and see what we have. Feel free to comment on anything you see. Bill, tracking an outbreak, a continent where the dead are not counted. This is Africa. The numbers coming out of Africa are low. Russia was low till recently. Many who recovered from COVID still haven't regained their sense of smell. And a free vaccine clinic is inundated in Houston. Ambulance workers ferrying the infected worry amid a surge. Some great photography here for this piece, and they're numbered. I haven't seen that in a while. It's interesting. They actually photograph and text by Gabriella and Gotti Jones. Each of the photos have a number on them, and it's almost like footnotes in the actual text. That's an interesting approach.
Yeah, the big news is that you've got the big news is that you've got the print edition. You're actually holding paper in your hand. I must be, I have to be honest that I'm pretty much purely digital now. Sometimes if I'm in, I'll get the paper, but I'm, people's, I don't know what people say about that, but yeah, I'm digital. I did read. I mean, again, there's a lot to read, and during this pandemic, I must admit that I've actually. Well, go ahead. Why don't you keep? I switched.
No, keep talking, Bill.
Yeah, Tom. Tom says.
Tom Jolly.
That he says, it's tough to appreciate the stress of writing and editing on a deadline until you've been there. You know, Tom, if Tom's listening, Tom once told me something, and he doesn't remember this. He said two things I've always remembered, because it's probably true. But one, I was in his office, he said, Bill, you always seem like you're fighting yourself. Tom, that's pretty. But he also said, one of my strengths, you know, there are people like some of my colleagues, like Harvey Harrison, they were great of going to these events at night and writing columns on deadline. And that was never my strength. But there's part of me that I wanted to do it just to prove something, just to prove it. And Tom said, Bill, why do you always, it's like torture. Why do you always put yourself in this position? You know, I gotta die, you know, but, but it's just, but it's unbelievable. I mean, that when I look back on it, and you're at a game, whether it's a Super Bowl or anything, and you're like, look at then, the editor said, how are you close? You know, but it is something that even it's hard to get the fellows now at the Undefeated. I'll sometimes put them in positions where they've got to like perform on deadline. You know,
sure.
It's really amazing. But what were we talking
about? I'll tell you, those corrections definitely stick with you. I worked, before I joined Digimentors full time, I worked with United Way, sending out a newsletter every morning to about 13,000 people. And I admit I made a few errors in my day on that email. I didn't have a copy editor, but I remember each one of those errors. They stick with you. They stick with you. I want to point out this article about the runoff elections in Georgia, such an important exercise we're going through. And of course, the runoff is on Tuesday. Asian Americans can tip elections, but for which party? Yeah. An interesting look at the rising number of Asian American voters. They increased their turnout this year 90% compared to 2016, which was pretty incredible. Several groups are mentioned here, but I want to do a specific call out to the Indian American Impact Fund. Neil Makija is their executive director of Impact. They're running a $2.5 million campaign. They raised more than $10 million this cycle to help support Indian American candidates and the Biden-Harris ticket. So there's a lot of work going on in Georgia this year. If anyone knows anyone in Georgia, please encourage them to vote. I know that Prasya has been sending postcards. I think Carla has as well. Whatever you can, let people know there's an election going on.
Yeah, I want to go back when I was talking to Sheree about the role of athletes. And one of the things that many of the players, with the Atlanta Falcons and particularly Elizabeth Williams, who played for the Dream in Atlanta, but they were saying that it's not over yet. That they were going to continue to beat that drum, to use whatever visibility they had to tell voters in Atlanta that it's not over yet. That you have to register again, and that you have to turn out. So again, it kind of gets back to the idea of athlete activism, but activism going beyond just being in the street and kneeling, but it's like really getting people engaged. So that story about what's going on in Atlanta just reminded me of the continued pivotal role that that athletes are having in terms of making of making sure that this Biden-Harris victory has some teeth to it.
And talking about Atlanta, check out this continuation of the front page article on the Jump. In Georgia runoff, raising uncomfortable truth. Great photograph of Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's running the quote, "People who have no vision traffic in division." Just really, I think that if he should win, he'll bring a different energy, more of a John Lewis type of energy to the Senate, which would be great, which is something that we desperately need. Atlanta's promise is tested in a year of racial and political tension. And this other article, a once in a generation moment, and then repeat. So there's a lot certainly going on. I want to make sure that we don't skip over this story. George Floyd Redux, if you will, father of man, killed by the Minneapolis police, says he learned of death after a raid. So this man was shot by the police, and then they raided his family's home in a search. I haven't read the article yet. I didn't see what the details were about the shooting, but anytime there's a shooting, officer-involved shooting with a person of color, it breaks your heart, and it's hard to see it again.
I do know. See it. I do know. Well, go ahead. I have something to say after we finish this.
Please, please, Bill.
Because I know we're going to talk about the magazine story.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go to the magazine.
But I've got an admission. I've got an admission to make that for most of my career. I mean, I've not been a sports fan probably since I was 16. I just stopped being a fan because I was not going to emotionally invest in things I have no control over. In fact, that's the core of the beginning of a book I'm working on about that, fans, and sort of my personal evolution. But so that's sort of, being a sports journalist and a journalist in general was great to the extent that it protects us against really revealing our emotions, because we're always interviewing people. We're always, the best defense is a great offense. We're always asking questions. We're, following the truth where it leads, usually away from us. But during this pandemic, I'd go to the games, and, we'd get on fans. You're just trying to escape. That's why you don't want to see protests and say, because you're trying to escape. But the worse and worse the news got, Neil, I said, you know what? I need to escape too, because this is just terrible. You turn on NPR, or you just turn even sometimes the front page, and particularly with the clown and with POTUS 45 and this whole reality show and the whole eroding of democracy. It's just awful. So I said, you know what, man, let me turn on the sports basketball show, or the NFL show, just to hear something that means absolutely nothing, about, and I don't know about you. This time during the pandemic, I watched every single Major League playoff game, baseball playoff game. Every one. I mean, almost every inning. I've never done that. My motto is, if I'm not covering it, it doesn't exist. But so I guess to an extent, again, this is apropos of nothing you asked, but I began to appreciate. Not only did I begin to appreciate escapism, but I guess I began to appreciate the extent to which fans care. And that's something that I probably, for a lot of my career, probably 30 something years, I probably fully didn't appreciate, because I was this journalist and sitting up in the press box and looking down. I probably did not fully appreciate the extent to which fans care for no reason. I mean, fans care about teams or allegiances. I sort of divide,
They certainly care, but if that New York Times cover story, the magazine cover story about the Big 12 going back, playing their games at odds, talking to the athletic directors, talking to the university presidents, should they have a season? Should they try and bring people back to campus? What's your take on that? I mean, was that a mistake? Did they do it for money? What's the deal?
All for money. I mean, I guess, and I sort of boycotted the entire college season. I mean, what I just said notwithstanding, the NFL, the NFL, you could kind of rationalize even with they're getting paid, but colleges, I think that all the athletes. I mean, I just started talking about $40 million slaves and power and control, but the reality is that all these athletes, no matter how much money you make, are being held hostage because unlike us, we could do these podcasts from home, or the journalists could do their journalism from home. They don't necessarily have to go into harm's way. But if you're an athlete, by definition, you're there mixing blood and sweat, and you are right in harm's way. So you have to do it. So but at least you could rationalize as a professional athlete, you're getting paid. But when you look at the college thing, it to me is the epitome of the plantation, because you've got, particularly at the Power 5 level, you got all these young black kids who are many of whom try to get to the NFL, coaching, and at the college level has become welfare for white coaches, So it's this, and you're having these adults kind of bully these young kids, not bully, but our kids have no shot against adults. We know that, they may think that they don't, but they have no shot. And so, these kids they're playing, they're getting sick. Many of them are going to probably have long-term effects from this virus, these heart issues and all that. So I just think it's disgraceful. Disgraceful isn't even the proper word, but it shows where we are, how we've evolved as a nation, where money has become, without question, the highest value of our society.
It's endangering people's lives.
Yeah, and because it's for the money, and that's and it sounds like naive and simplistic, but that's where it is, and it's really, I know people whose kids go to Ohio State and play, and I'm kind of happy for them and all that, but man, at any cost, at any cost is kind of tough,
Before we close, and we're at 10 o'clock, we advertise the show to go to 10:15. Hopefully you can stick with us for just a little bit longer, Bill. I do want to take a look at this special section that Tom Jolly gave us a heads up on, notes from the newsroom, which is really, really interesting. So I'm going to turn the New York Times camera back on and go to this. And we'll put this right here. Do you remember these overnight emails that would go out? In the acknowledgement, these are emails from Steve Kenny, senior editor for Nights at the New York Times, would send these out. May have been someone else when you were there. It's a fascinating look at kind of a summary of the day's events and kind of setting up what to expect. This is an email. These are lightly edited emails that are annotated, right? So Wednesday, January 1st, Happy New Year. It starts off with some New Year's Eves are a snooze. This wasn't one of them. We sent 3 breaking news alerts after 6 p.m. In print, we ended the night with 2 spectacular A1 photos, one from New York and one from Australia. And it shows, what's interesting, this is a print-only special section from what I can tell. I think this is a special for subscribers. And they have hyperlinks in the text, right? So this is a blue hyperlink, one from Australia. It's almost like a footnote. This shows that photo. And then they make another reference to a breaking news alert. And you can look over here to the alert that was sent out. And then for the iconic A1 shot for Times Square, they have the picture right here. So it goes through the entire year. Not every day, skipping days, but some important, the first U.S. outbreak, South Carolina primary results over here. Just some really interesting content. What was your experience with breaking news, Bill? You were a columnist, but did you ever have to?
Well, yeah, yeah. But since we're this like Sunday, we're truth telling, revealing stuff. I mean, I didn't read a lot of that stuff, man. To be honest with you, I'm looking for the memo from Tom Johnson, something like, did I screw up or how does this affect me? Did I screw up? Right? Was there a correction? Or if there's a breaking news, something to say, hey, so-and-so died, or hey, can you get on this? Something like that. And it's specific to me. But I know that I was there for 34 years. I know there are a lot of folks who read every single email and all involved with it, and kind of not me. I sometimes in my own world, how does this affect me? And in fact, I told Arthur Sulzberger once, because I was, talking about these things. Sometimes, and this was a while back with Black journalists, it's changed a little bit because we're being acknowledged more. But I said, sometimes being at the Times, man, it's like, you're being invited to this parade, but you're always sitting in the reviewing stand. And our job is always to applaud all our colleagues who come, I'm like, there comes to be a point where that's not fulfilling. So let me just do my job, write my column. But having said all that, this is very fascinating stuff. I'm looking forward to reading it, but I didn't really spend a lot of my time, doing this kind of stuff, because 9 out of 10 times I had nothing to do with me or my work or anything I did, so that's
this is definitely for people who are news junkies, Bill.
I'm a junkie.
Linda Lawrence is looking forward to seeing it. I want to read out when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. The note: the first report of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death came in about 7:30. We were 30 minutes away from the close of the first edition. Adam Liptak had 800 words ready. We were able to fit the story and 4-column photo underneath a 5-column banner. So this shows on the left-hand side the diagram, and Josh Krushner tweets out the diagrams every now and then. And here's the actual front page that they put out that day. So, folks, this is another reason to subscribe to the print edition. Bill made a point that we're actually have the paper in our hand, getting some ink on my fingers, which is a nice experience after a while. If you've missed it, and we have several people who, watching the read along, have subscribed to the paper just because they've been able to see it through our lens. But this is the notes from the newsroom. Overnight emails tell the story of 2020. Sri, I see you're back. Hopefully audio is a little bit better. Do you want to take us home, Sri?
Sure. Just wanted to say this has been a fascinating, it's been just fascinating to listen to Bill and to you, and as you go through the news, so many interesting stories that you've been covering. I do want to show everyone a moment from the past, since we've been talking a little bit about history here and things. Here is a photograph of Bill and I together at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and our friend Chris Gorman, who is now at the Folk Art Museum. He took this photo, and this was taken in about 2015 or so, but I posted this again at the end of your 35-year run at the New York Times. And that was a fun lunch that we had that day.
I remember you picked up the tab.
And then soon after, I lost my job there. So that was, hopefully they were not connected, but it was just great to spend time with you. Bill, you have an interest in art and music. You were the jazz critic of the Baltimore Sun in a past life. Talk about those other interests too, please.
Well, music has always been music, and particularly the music we call jazz, has always been important to me. Something I've loved for a long time. My father, Mark Lee, says, "Who are some of your favorite jazz artists?" I loved it. Yeah, I mean, just everybody. I mean, my first trip my first trip overseas was with the Billy Harper. I was a road manager for the Billy Harper Quintet. I was a jazz critic for the Baltimore Sun, and Billy Harper is somebody I just love and have such respect for. But he called me up and he said, "Listen, man, you writing all this stuff. If you really want to learn about this music, come be my road manager." And so I spent a month. We went to Turkey, Istanbul, Accra. We went to Poland, Romania, Portugal, and I was a road manager, and it was just phenomenal. It was just really phenomenal. But also politically, I guess I see the same what we call the intersection in the music, where you've got all these great innovators, African American innovators, but again, the power and control in the music, the club owners, the distributors were not Black. You know, I just saw the same power dynamic in sports and music, is that we were the innovators, we were the creative people, but there was no power, no control. And I guess I was, as much as I love the music, I was just more interested in that power dynamic. Who defines us? Who defines the story? Most of particularly back then, most of the music critics, the quote unquote jazz critics, were white and white men. That's changed to some extent. You know, we just lost the great Stanley Crouch. But the music has been just so important part of my life, important part of my writing. It's inspirational. Wynton Marsalis is, I think, one of the most important figures in the music in terms of what he's done, not just as an innovator, what his family's done, but what he has done on building Jazz at Lincoln Center. And something I wish I would have been able to write a little more about it at the time, but things turned out okay. And we still have time. And I'm with the Undefeated and it's kind of like a blank slate. So, but the music has always been very. My brother is an opera singer. He's in Germany. He's been in Germany since 1990. He was Gerard Rhoden, and he's had just a fantastic career as an opera singer. So the music has just been a really important part of my life.
That's just incredible to hear all those aspects, and to hear about Gerard Rhoden as well, and to have moved to Germany in 1990 as the wall was falling and everything must have been quite a amazing experience for him too.
Yeah, I told him he's got a book that he's got to write, because it's really to be a tenor. I mean, he's moved around. Right now he's in a town called ULM, Germany, but he's been all around, but he's taken most of the talent in the family, but great.
I do want to point out that Tom Jolly says he's a huge fan of Bill, even more because of his mentoring and sponsorship work. And Bill had made this point that mentoring is important, but sponsorship is even more important. Can you explain the difference between those two terms as you see it?
Well, mentoring is kind of what most of us do. Mentoring is, you work with kids and you take a kid, but sponsorship, and I kind of got this from John Skipper, who's a former president of ESPN. But sponsorship means I'm taking you into the meetings I go into. I'm taking you into my meetings. I'm introducing you to the power people. I'm telling people that, hey, this is my person. There's no, this is my person. All right, that's sponsorship. Mentorship is, yes, well, I worked with you and I kind of read your stories and that's fine. I mentor, but sponsorship is about power and control. I remember when I got my first job I was at Morgan State University, and Frances Murphy, who was the executive editor of the Afro-American newspaper, and her family founded it. And she told me, I played football at Morgan, and she told me, she said, listen, if you don't decide to go to graduate school in journalism, if you're not drafted by an NFL team, you march your black butt to the Afro and start working. And so I didn't get drafted and decided not to go to graduate school. So in February of 1973, I marched my butt up 3 flights of stairs and start work at the Afro. And the city editor came there, and she had nothing to do with it. I was there because Frances Murphy was my sponsor. She said, "This is my guy. He starts now," and that's, and I know it was, and so that's sponsorship, and sponsorship is really, really very important. Mentorship is important, but sponsorship, particularly for young African Americans, women, but to have a sponsor who says, "This is my guy, this is my person," and now it still is up to you to perform. You still have to perform, but sponsorship is critical. Mentorship is important too. Now, don't get me wrong, but sponsorship is really important.
Thank you. And Tom is the print editor of the New York Times, and he's been a guest on our show multiple times. And Paula just put in a link to your brother singing, so people can find that on YouTube, and also the correct spelling there. So he has that. She's put that in there. And Diane says, thank you. Thank you, New York Times Read Along family, for such a special episode.
Yeah, probably.
And lots of other great comments coming in here.
With Tom watching, I want to make sure we get Linda's comment. She added the print edition. She subscribed to the paper this summer after years of watching, of getting digital and watching the read along. And our friend Ellen Austin as well. The print edition is the best. I can't read the paper on the phone. So Tom, just want to let you know we're doing our part to keep print alive and support the paper. As I mentioned earlier, we are big fans of the paper, of the New York Times, of print journalism, but also critics when we have to be. And it's that relationship that's really important. As Sri knows, I grew up reading the New York Times, and this is very important to a lot of us. A lot of us love looking at the inside of the paper, looking at the backstories, etc. And Ellen sharing that the show is terrific.
Bill, before you go, any comment on the capitalization of the word Black? That is now the standard in most places. It was not at the time that you were writing most of your columns.
Yeah, long overdue. I would do it, and then they'd always kind of lowercase it. You would do it, and then they would, because the style was lowercase. No, we had to do that. And at the Undefeated, it's always been capitalized. This is so funny. I went, and this shows like kind of some little difference between the HBC. When I went to that, when I was at Morgan, we would play the Negro national anthem first, and then play the national anthem. And I thought, well, doesn't everybody do this? So it's little things like that. We sing "Lift Every Voice" first, and then throw in the national anthem. So yeah, I would always just capitalize Black, B, and then they send it back. But no, it's like Cool Papa Bell said. He said something. People say I was ahead of my time. I wasn't ahead of my time. You're just catching up. So it's all good, man. It's all about evolution. Capital B. That's what Muddy Waters said. And Muddy Waters said that. And I'm a man. Said capital B. No boy.
But you're capitalizing Black long overdue. But such as hard work.
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, it's good. It's a good thing.
And there's the link to Lift Every Voice that Paula shared on Facebook. Again, a great example of the role that our team plays, making it a whole experience for folks, doing the research and finding that link to your brother to Lift Every Voice and sharing it with folks.
That was a big one. Please send me the link to my brother singing, please. So I can forward it.
We'll be happy.
He will love.
We'll be happy to do that.
Yeah, I'll send it to him like now, because they're like 5 hours ahead, 6 hours ahead. He's a big Chicago Bears fan, but I think he would really love that. So thank you.
Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that he's a Bears fan.
Me too. I told him, said Gerard, again, I said, Gerard, that's a lost cause, man.
Go Pack, go.
you know, yeah. It's part of the reason why I became a mercenary sports writer, because I was the Packers when I was like 15, 16. They used to destroy every dream that we had. I mean, every dream we had, the Packers would come and just destroy them. You know, I mean, every little dream. We left one. It was just rip it to shreds. You know, and even today, there's still a bit of me. I still see the colors and all that. Man, I respect it. I just can't get with it. I mean, I respect Aaron Rodgers and all that, but I don't know. And now that I'm sort of embracing fandom again, I kind of say, screw the Packers.
If we're talking sports, I got to say baseball is my thing, and as mentioned earlier, huge Yankees fan. To hear Claire's stories about being in the locker room in the '80s, that was something. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure, Sheree, we have a couple of announcements we want to share before we close. Bill, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much. If you can hold on for just a bit, want to make sure Sheree mentioned that she's on call. That's a show that's going to be starting at 11 o'clock. Sheree will be producing that show. The guests are Dr. Eric Fegel-Ding and Dr. Sharmila. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce that name correctly, Sheree.
Dissanayake.
Thank you for the help there. She's on Call is a great show by Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. You can catch it at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And then on Thursday, our friend Stephen Kaplan has the Spin It Social Hour. This has been a Saturday morning show. He is going to every other week on Thursdays, and it's a great lineup for the first show of 2021. Our friend Jonathan Borstein helps him out with this show. 5 photographers: Nick Curry, Claudia Paul, Peter De Silva, Gina Moon, and Esdras Suarez. So check that out on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then finally, just want to give a shout out to our next week's show is going to be with Julie Scalpo, a former New York Times staff writer, journalist, author, and justice advocate. She wrote The Women Who Made New York. She'll be on the New York Times read-along next week, January 10th, 2021. Still getting used to saying 2021. So with that, Bill, we'd like to give you a chance to offer the last word on today's show. Any final thoughts?
No, but it's been great. It's been great. Sheree's great reconnecting with you, and Neil, great meeting you. It was great hearing from Carla. She asked, the answer is always yes. And great seeing Tom. And the Times is one of the most unique journalist experiences in my life. And I hold the paper and just so high regard. What Dean Baquet is doing has been tremendous. And when we went back to the notes from the that I said I didn't read a lot of stuff, but I always admired how the teamwork and the machinery that was the Times, of just being able to get all these working parts every single day, coordinate all working parts, and come up with just a great report every day. And it's just really a source of great pride that I was able to spend 34 years there. Pretty remarkable, actually. When I resigned, not retired, when I look back, I said, damn, man, how did I spend 34 years there? But, it's such an enjoyable thing that the time just went by and you didn't really think about the years. And now I'm fortunate to be at another great company in its own right, with Disney and, ESPN, the worldwide leader, and the Undefeated, which if you haven't checked it out, check it out. It's just a great site. We have a lot of great young, really outstanding young Black reporters and writers. Just really, and then to have the fellowship. It's just continues to be a blessing. So thank you guys for this. continue to have these great shows. This is great form. So
thank you. And everyone, please check out the Bros Pod, Bill Rhoden on Sports on Twitter, on all, wherever you listen to podcasts. He and Jamal Murphy talk sports and so much more. So please check that out as well. Bill, you're awesome. To everyone who's watching, I want to thank our family of viewers. Jim Roberts says you're a great soul, Bill, and he retweeted the show, so we got a nice bump of his viewers joining us as well.
The great Jim Roberts.
Yeah, great Jim Roberts is the right word.
A lot of great folks, man. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Bill.
All right.
Bye-bye, everyone. See you next week.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
God.
Vaccines. Good luck with the vaccines, everybody.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed.
All right. All right.